When is it time to upgrade your camera? There is a right time, and I'm going to tell you. What's up? My name is Trevor, Hollywood editor turned full-time exhibitionist here on YouTube.
You're a freak.
Why? Because Hollywood fired me, and making YouTube videos is way more fun. I get to be the star of every movie. When I first started out on YouTube, this is the camera I use. It looks something like this, an iPhone. And some people might say, oh, the best camera is the one you have with you, but that's not entirely true. The best camera is the one you actually use. Some people have great cameras, but they end up using their phone, so that's the best camera for them. So what's the best time to upgrade?
Why don't you just tell me now?
There are several factors you want to consider when upgrading, but the biggest one, I believe, is finding that when you're shooting with the camera that you use right now, that you are missing features that you wish you had. Yes, when I first started out on YouTube, I used this an awful lot. But my wife also had a Canon 5D Mark II, which she used for her photography business, and that camera shot really nice HD video with a full frame sensor. It was kind of the pioneer in this DSLR space shooting video, so it was a great camera in some regards, but it was missing two huge things that I really needed, which were a flip out screen so I can pose shots myself without somebody helping me, and number two, I needed continuous autofocus so that if I move my head a little bit like that, I wouldn't lose focus like the 5D Mark II would do. And this camera, the iPhone I was using back then, was not exactly feature rich. It shot some great stuff, but it didn't look like a DSLR or a mirrorless camera looks today. So what did I do? I made my list of things that I wanted my camera to have. Specifically, flip out screen, obviously, continuous autofocus, obviously, like every camera on the market pretty much has those two things. The other things I really wanted it to have were in-body image stabilization. So when I was doing those walkie-talkie shots, the background wouldn't be all shaky. Number two, I needed to have a mic input so I could add a higher quality mic than what you have on a camera. Number three, I wanted it to have a full frame sensor. Number four, I wanted it to have, coincidentally, 4K video because that's the future. And number five, I wanted it to have at least 120 frames a second, so slow motion would look good. And the camera that fit the bill best at that time for me, which had great reviews and everybody loved, was this one, the Panasonic Lumix GH5. And this is the camera I'm still using 4 years later. It is an amazing camera in many regards, and I've shot almost all of my videos using this camera since then. But now it's getting a little dated for me.
You were such a whiner.
There are specifically three things.
You mean 4, don't you? Oh yeah, 4.
That this camera is missing that I want. And the biggest one is I need a camera that has reliable autofocus. They've had a bunch of firmware updates on this camera to try to improve the focus, but frankly, the autofocus sucks. I get this pulsing background back and forth because the camera's like focusing, oh, background, your face, background, face. I mean, look at some of my videos where I'm just a talking head video. I'm not even moving that much, but it's still like pulsing. If I'm outside walking, it's, if there's a hot, bright object in the background, it's pulsing and it drives me freaking nuts. I even had a viewer comment on one of my videos on my other channel, Life Untethered. You should watch that channel right there. It's a travel channel. It's like, dude, I can't handle the focus drifting back and forth. That drives me friggin' nuts. So everyone knows that the autofocus on the GH5 blows, and that's a big one. So that's one reason to upgrade, and that alone is enough because that drives me nuts. It makes some stuff that should be unusable. It's like I'm not gonna go reshoot it, so I throw stuff up that makes me want to vomit. So that's number one. Number two, I would love to have 4K 120 frames per second. So like really smooth, buttery slow motion in 4K. This camera can do 120 frames per second in HD, 1920 by 1080. It can even do 180 frames a second in HD, which is huge. I never actually use, but I should. And the next big one for me is more dynamic range. Now what's dynamic range? Dynamic range means that there is more gradation between the blacks and the whites. There's a lot of shades of gray in between. And in practice, the way that works is if you have something that's recording here that's kind of exposed less and the background's like a bright, hot sun, you know, on this camera, the background's gonna be blown out, it's gonna be white. But if you get a higher end camera, it's gonna be able to pull those colors in. And because it's got more degrees of gradation, not just black and white. An example of low dynamic range would be just black and just white with no shades of gray. But because there's so much dynamic range on some of these higher end cameras, I can have a blue sky instead of a white sky, even if my face is in the shade. And that is something that I struggle with in literally every vehicle. Nope, every video. Yeah, because with this camera, sometimes I'm in the shade, got the sunny sky back there, and it's like, oh wow, my face looks black and the sky looks white, and I got to mess with color correction and it still looks like garbage. So for me, that's a huge one. So the time to upgrade for me is when I cannot do the things I want to do with this camera. It's creating me more grief. It's creating unusable shots. It's creating poor quality video. And I know specific things in other cameras that would fix all of that really well. The final feature my next camera is going to have is a full frame sensor. Yes, I wanted it when I got the GH5, but I sacrificed the full frame sensor for the other features that this had. Why do I want a full frame sensor? Because I want to be able to control the background bokeh, the autofocusness, have my face in focus and have the background all blurry and look all cinematic, and that's way easier to accomplish with a full frame sensor. Another advantage of having a full frame sensor is better low light performance. If you're doing night shots or early morning or late evening shots and the lighting's not great, you can get great detail with the right full frame sensor. I mean, some are more geared for photography that don't work as well in low light, but those that are made for video, they got bigger pixels and it gathers more light, and you can have stellar looking stuff no matter, I mean, within reason, but under pretty low light situations. So the next camera I get is gonna have a killer full frame sensor that is actually made for video. Another thing to consider is, can you swing it? You gotta have the money to get the new camera. And if a camera is your business like YouTube, then maybe you stretch a little bit to get it. The other thing to consider is, will you use it? Because when you get a new camera and a new system, there's a learning curve. Some people are more tech savvy than others. Are you gonna use it and go, oh, are you gonna get a great camera and go, oh, this is an amazing new camera, but I don't have time to learn it, so I'm just gonna keep using my iPhone. If that's the case, don't buy it. Something else to consider is, you getting a new camera is not going to get you more views on your channel, unless maybe you're a camera review channel, in which case it might, or maybe even on this channel when I get my next camera, I'll for sure do a review on that. It's gonna help me a little bit in that regard, but a new camera isn't going to be the thing that propels your channel forward. There are so many other factors that go into making a video that gets views or a video that gets you business if you are a real estate agent or some other entrepreneur with a YouTube channel. The gear, yeah, it matters a little bit. When you get to that point, like the things that I've been talking about, it starts to matter a little bit more. But there are people that have grown massive businesses with just an iPhone or a point and shoot camera. And there's still people that are killing it with video quality that looks like, yeah. So depending on the kind of content you're creating, the camera you use may be almost irrelevant. So don't think it's a magic pill that's gonna get you there. What camera am I going to get? The next camera I'm gonna share with you when I have it, but I'm pretty excited about it. So go ahead and post in the comments below what you think my next camera is gonna be. What's the one thing holding me back? It's this. Hey Leela!
The answer is no!
Yeah, I'm just waiting for final approval that I'm gonna pull the trigger on the next one. A lot of people are still using this camera, the Panasonic Lumix GH5. In fact, here's a video I made all about getting that camera. You should watch it. Hit subscribe if you want to grow your YouTube channel and become a better filmmaker. I can't wait to see the incredible content you create.